Hey, deserving listeners, Single Life, Tell All, Discovery Plus, 90 Day Fiancé, Kirk Honda, Psychology in Seattle. Let's watch.
How are you?
Good. How you feeling?
I'm nervous.
So just wanted to let you know that both Josh and Mike will be here today, and they will be in your segment together.
Oh, can we just, I'm sorry, I don't want.
It's interesting. I always wonder what goes on behind the scenes between the producers and the cast members. And of course, this could all be faked as well, but it doesn't look like it. It certainly stands to reason. What Natalie is saying right now is she is being informed that both Josh and Mike are going to be in the room together or on a Skype call or something together. Do people use Skype anymore? With Natalie, and she is, I think, saying, could I just talk with Mike and then Mike go away and then I just talk with Josh? I don't want the three of us to have a situation because so it's been a number of months since the last episode, right? And we last left off where she was trying to get back with Mike, but she'd only been with Mike for just a few hours in Sequim near Seattle. And she hadn't talked with Josh at that point. So she's either with Mike, she's with Josh, she's with neither, she's with both, or something else, who knows. If this is real, it is interesting, right? That they're telling her that both are going to be there. And she's like, could we just not do that? And of course, the producers design it that way because they want it to be dramatic. They want it to be interesting. And so they're probably not going to listen to her. But it's also interesting that if you think, I'd be so curious as to how the contract works exactly and the pressure and the kinds of demands put, because I'm guessing if Natalie had her way, she would say, no, I don't want to do that. And then she could just have her way. But the way she asks, it looks like she's saying that they have the power and she has to ask them for something. When, if it were me, I'd just be like, nah, I'm not going to do it. I'll just walk away or something. There's some kind of demand on them that plays into all their decisions, right? All the things they do on camera have potentially something to do with those demands. And it would be interesting to know what those were. I mean, I think we know what they are in general, but I wonder how they play out exactly with each person.
My personal life is a mess. I mean, I can't anymore. I know Mike more than 7 years, and he's part of my life, but we kind of cannot agree.
7 years? Has it really been? See, the thing for me is I started watching this show a few years ago and would occasionally go back in time and rewatch previous seasons. And so I have a real messed up point of view of the timeline here, because to me, everything's happened in the past few years because that's when I've watched it. But of course, it goes back further. Jenny and Summit go back 10 years. Natalie and Mike going back 7 years. Is that right? Wait, let's rewind that.
My personal life is a mess. I mean, I can't anymore. I know Mike more than 7 years.
She's known Mike for 7 years. And have they been dating the whole time? I can't imagine they were friends online for very long before they started dating. So, wow, 7 years. Yeah. For some reason, I find that more comforting when I learn details like that. It feels less weighty, feels less significant if they've only been dating for a few years. 7 years, that's a big deal. And of course plays into how much bonding and attachment you have, how many complicated feelings you have about a particular individual. But anyway, she's saying that he's part of my life, but we kind of cannot agree. So this seems to imply, I'm sure we'll find out, but this seems to imply that her and Mike, at the very least, aren't having a really non-problematic relationship at this point.
And he's part of my life, but we kind of cannot agree. I met Josh, but I haven't figured out this place for him in my life.
Okay, so it sounds like she's potentially with Mike and Josh, sort of. Of course we'll find out.
He just somewhere here, and I let Josh and Mike decide and talk. I don't really know.
I'll let Mike and Josh talk and decide, meaning which one will pick her? Or is she just saying, I'll let them talk amongst themselves and decide how they want to feel about things? What is she saying there?
This place for him in my life. He just somewhere here, and I let Josh and Mike decide and talk.
if she is truly saying that, maybe she's just saying things because she's nervous. But if she means it, then, that'll happen sometimes. And that's not irrational. If a friend told me that they were having a hard time choosing between two people and they're just like, I can't make a choice. I just flip a coin or have the two of them just figure it out amongst themselves because I've tried to make a choice and it hasn't worked. I would guess, though, that if I were her therapist, that I would say, what do you want? What do you need? You don't necessarily need to make a choice. You need to be empathetic and caring towards those around you. You need to tell them where you're at. But, if they're willing to be with you while you think about it, then that's okay. So if I were, knowing what I know about Natalie, I would, I run into this situation a lot as a professional and as a friend. And I would just say, love is a mystery. And, you could decide to be with Mike. You could try things with Josh. You could be with neither. You could continue to be in this holding pattern. So what I usually do in this situation with clients in particular is I talk about all the pros and cons. We'll explore each option because I find that a lot of people, so you can think about this for yourself, is that when you're in a conundrum like this, whether it's dating or job or whether you should move or something, is sometimes people will just be frozen in the anxiety and the indecision and be just waiting for some sign from God telling them what they should do instead of a more systematic approach, which is to fully explore each option. And I find that people are afraid to do that because they're afraid of the cons. They're afraid of the consequences, so they don't even want to think about that option. So for Natalie, it's possible that if I were to be working with her, I'd say, well, okay, let's. I appreciate that you're anxious. I appreciate that you feel the need to freeze in the moment, but I think that's causing you some distress because you don't know what to do. So let's fully explore things. And I would say, okay, so if you were to be with Josh and break up with Mike, what would that be like? What are the pros and the cons to taking that action? A lot of people in Natalie's shoes would say, but I don't want to hurt Mike's feelings, but I don't want to hurt Mike's feelings. I'd be like, we're not hurting anyone's feelings. We're just exploring. So yes, it would hurt Mike's feelings potentially, but we're just exploring an option. So if you were to break up with Mike and fully, commit to Josh and see how things go with him, how would that feel? But what if it's the wrong choice? What if it's the wrong choice? I was like, yeah. What if it is the wrong choice? It might be the wrong choice. There's no way to know. Let's put that aside. People will run into those anxieties and then they just shut down instead of allowing themselves to explore, which might be the only way to come to a possible decision about this sort of thing. So then you go through the pros and the cons of Josh, and you actually acknowledge the pain that you'll feel, and maybe it's the wrong choice, and you walk yourself through it. And then you say, okay, let's say you break up with Josh and you go with Mike. Let's say that you break up with both. Let's say that you stay in the same zone. And sometimes I'll fully explore that because oftentimes people will think this state of indecision is bad. And it's possible that when you add up the 5 different options, staying in a holding pattern might be the best option because the other options are unknown or there are too many consequences. It's better to stay here while you still try to figure out what to do because people will shame themselves for not taking an action right away and then they get too anxious to take any action. It's very fraught with anxiety. So that's what I have done, and that's what I would do with her. And I would also try to remain as differentiated myself because there would be a temptation as another human to want someone to make a choice. If you've ever been a friend of someone in a situation like this, in all likelihood, you felt a compulsion to push the other person to make a choice, to commit to one direction because as bystanders, we want things to have certainty. We tend not to like question marks or gray zones or unknowns. And so we would want Natalie to choose, as you're watching, you might just be like, Natalie, make a choice, or don't be with either. And what's it to us? It doesn't impact us what Natalie does. It probably doesn't even necessarily impact you what your friend or family member does when they're in a situation like this. So as a therapist, I would be, reminding myself to calm down and to not fuse with the situation because it's not me. It's not my problem. It's her problem. And I'm involved and I'm listening and I'm a therapist of the situation if this was a client. But it's not my problem. I'm not impacted negatively or positively necessarily by whether or not she takes an action or not. So it's just maybe you can practice that yourself. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's talk about empowerment. When we feel empowered, we recognize our strengths. When we feel empowered and we experience adversity, we're more likely to see it as a welcome challenge rather than an overwhelming obstacle. And since we're social creatures, we often need help from others to feel empowered at times. We might need others to give us perspective. We might need others to recognize how we might be able to overcome the obstacle. And sometimes the people around us, they're really not that much help. I've been there before. When I went to therapy for the first time when I was 19 years old, it was primarily because none of my friends were very helpful in this area. Sometimes it's really great to talk with a therapist when you want to feel more empowered. Well, that's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp is convenient and flexible and affordable. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
Wait, what is coming?
Wait, what is coming? Okay. All right.
Hey, Josh, Natalie mentioned moving to Los Angeles.
Yes.
Have you two discussed this?
We've talked about it.
How do you feel about her moving to LA?
Yeah, I'm excited for it.
But she's not moving in with you?
That's not the plan right now.
Do you have
Okay, so we're learning from Natalie that she is thinking about moving from Florida to LA, and Josh is open to it. Josh is kind of a mystery because if you just look at his verbatim and his behavior, he's all in with Natalie, or at least significantly invested and committed to the relationship, optimistic, I guess. But if you look at, I don't know, between the lines or what would seem rational given the situation, how little he knows her, then I wonder what's going on there. Is it that he's rushing things forward for the show, but he's kind of into Natalie? Is he not into Natalie at all? I mean, I'm going to throw it out there that it's a possibility. I mean, that sounded funny. Hey, look, I'm just going to throw that out there as if what I'm saying somehow matters. But Josh, I'm going to throw it out there that there's a possibility that he was interested in Natalie in the beginning, and at a certain point during this season when we saw them fighting, well, we saw her screaming at him and accusing him of all sorts of things and having a lot of uncomfortable moments in situations that didn't call for it. I mean, I'm actually just recalling now because it's been a while since I've watched it, but you could imagine that he would think, wow, no, this is not comfortable. I don't want to be in this relationship. And then thinks, well, I'll string it along for the show, or maybe it's good for my business. Maybe I'll just see what happens. It's something fun to do. I'll say that I don't know about Josh, obviously, but there are people and maybe some of you have been in a situation where you go on a lot of dates and for a long period of time. And you have a lot of moments where you think, ooh, this could be the one. Oh, no, that's not the one. Ooh, this could be the one. Oh, no, that's not the one. You rinse and repeat that enough times, you might get demoralized over time and just be like, screw it. I'll just date for the fun of it, I guess. None of it matters because it's always going to end. And it's just something to entertain myself with. Not that you would lie or that you would deceive or be cynical about it, but you would just go with the flow. You just be like, I'm just not going to think about whether or not this is a long-term or a good relationship even, because I was in that mode for 20 years and it never worked out for me. So I might as well just be a leaf in the wind and not really even think about, so I'm not going to invest my heart. I'm not going to invest my hopes, but I'll have fun. It can be liberating in a certain way. So, I'll throw that out there as a possibility for Josh, but I don't know. What do you think? Maybe we'll get some clarity. But he seems to be a little guarded. His words don't seem guarded, but his demeanor seems guarded, if you know what I'm saying.
And they haven't been since the beginning. Let's take a look.
Like, honestly, are you involved with someone?
What do you mean, romantically?
Yes.
No.
Are you sure? If you're not committed, I don't want you. I don't need you.
I think it's too early.
Yeah, I think this was the first date. I think, which is fine. And I said this at the time, and I won't repeat myself, which I usually do, but, well, I'll repeat myself slightly by saying that if Natalie wants to say, hey, no harm, no foul, what I want is, I don't want to have a casual dating relationship. So we're either fully thinking about commitment or we're not. And I understand if that's not what you're into. Most Americans or most people aren't into that, but that's what I want. And then Josh can make a choice. He could say, oh, well, I don't know if I really want to do that, so I guess no, that's a bummer. Or, well, okay, I'm not dating anyone else, but yeah, I mean, I won't date anyone else if that's what you're wanting. So there's nothing wrong with having the conversation, but she comes at him as if he's a jerk face even before he answers the question. But he ends up kind of answering it, at least over time, in the direction that is in her favor, which makes me wonder if he's been mildly coerced into it. Anyway, let's watch.
You know, on our second date to talk about being like exclusive.
The point of relationship if I'm not exclusive.
Okay.
By the way, I floated the idea back then that this might be a cultural thing, and Ukrainians contacted me and said, no, to us as Ukrainians, Natalie is particular. There are a lot of people like her in Ukraine, but most people, and at least the people who were emailing and commenting, were saying that casual dating is absolutely a thing, or at least dating in the beginning without any commitment being, discussed, similar or the same as the way Americans will date. So there is something different about her, which we could imagine as to why that is. I think it's because she's had tremendous abandonment and betrayal traumas growing up.
Okay.
You have a house in LA. Why did you stay in a hotel?
We both stayed at the Mondrian. We stayed on
But why?
the same floor.
You have a house there. Why
a
didn't
condo. I just staying with her.
I just asked. I'm just curious.
Sure.
Debbie just asked, I don't know, that seemed like a production, we need a word for it, like production motivated question from Debbie. One, I'm surprised Debbie even took note of that, because I didn't take note of that he has a house in LA. Or I guess we knew that, right? Anyway, but that she would bring it up because this is to provoke Natalie's issues, which seems to be working.
Why you stay there if you have a house in LA?
Well, because we were getting up like the next morning together, and it was...
And it was their first date. I would say that Josh didn't have her over to his house because it was their first and second date. That's it. I hope that Josh can say that. Although he's not. He's like, no, we had this thing at work and da-da-da-da-da.
Okay.
Everything
I
was
was just
right there.
curious.
So let me ask you both at the same time, what is the state of your relationship?
I think that we're talking a lot more. I think our relationship is growing. I mean, I think we're seeing where this is going.
She won't even look at him.
Okay, you are not exclusive right now.
So Tim says she won't even look at him. By the way, earlier when Tim came out, Sean said something like, was labeling him as someone who doesn't hold back, someone that will just say what's on his mind. And Sean said something like, you're not going to hold back this time, or you're going to really be spontaneous. You're going to say things that are on your mind, right? Tim's like, yeah, and I don't know. Obviously, I have no idea what's happening, but I wonder if they had Tim and Kenny on a couple tell-alls ago, and they wanted at least Tim to create drama or to say dramatic things that would be critical or snarky and judgmental, and that didn't seem to happen. Kenny and Tim, their reaction seemed extremely bland. God bless them, they can react however they want to, but I wonder if they had a conversation with him or with Sean or behind the scenes, or just like, okay, Tim, you have to participate. You have to make this worth it. Where potentially they might even be paying him money, right? Obviously, they're spending a lot of time. But anyway, so Tim says spontaneously, snarkily, or something observationally, that Natalie isn't even looking at Josh, which is something that I think we've often seen, that I think is a result of Natalie's extreme anxiety when it comes to relationships. I think that's why she's averting her gaze. Also, you could frame it as a regression. I'll often talk about regression. It's a Freudian idea that I think still stands, that when we are stressed, we will tend to regress to an earlier phase of life, earlier phase of development. We saw Danielle seemingly do that. We all tend to do that. Under extreme stress, we might even go into a fetal position, right? Now, there's no scientific way of proving that it's quote unquote a regression, but it stands to reason, right? That we would want to go back to a time when we felt safer because people were taking care of us or less responsible or something. If you've ever had kids, you have seen them regress, whether you labeled it or not. But I'm guessing that you did observe that your 6-year-old, when they were stressed, might revert to a 3-year-old syntax. You would notice they're using sentences and words and a tone of voice that they used when they were much younger to try to provoke us to care for them, right? It's another reason why we regress, not only because we're trying to go inward to find a safer place, but we're also trying to signal to others that we're vulnerable and needy. So that's another possible reason as to why Natalie is averting her gaze, because when she does that, it has a vibe of a scared child, right? Like a scared 7-year-old. All right, well, that is it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.